So it dawned on me the other day that I've been making quite a lot of videos recently, and I realised I hadn't done a training update. Now, I haven't done a training update because I thought to myself, well actually, the training that I'm doing is no different to the approach that I've been taking over the last 20 years, so why do I need to make a training video? And then I realised that actually, I've never really gone into any detail as to the approach that I take to my training. So in this video today, I'm going to do two things really. One, break down a little bit what polarised training is, and a little bit of what it isn't as well, and where its flaws lie, but take that approach into how I'm applying it, or at least how I've been applying it over the last 6 months, particularly getting ready to ride from London to Paris. So to begin with, let's have a look at what polarised training is first. So what exactly is polarised training? Well, in short, and I mean very short here, we're polarising where we're spending our time. We've got very easy training and we've got very, very high intensity training. And what we tend to do with polarised training is we spend a lot of time at the low intensity and a little bit of time at the high intensity and very little, if any time at all, in the middle. Now, some of you will have heard of a famous theory called Pareto's rule, or 80-20, or 1 in 5, and it applies to economics and world wealth and all sorts of advertising ideas, and it's a pretty common kind of ratio of 80-20. And Matt Fitzgerald in his book 80-20 Endurance explains that we should be spending 20% of our time training at 80% of our maximum, and we should be spending 80% of our times at 20% of our maximum. So if you do a bit of reading on people's training habits, or you're a coach, what you'll find out is that a lot of people spend a lot of time sitting just below threshold with their training. People will go out for a run, or they'll ride their bikes at an intensity that feels good, feels fast to them, feels like hard work, but it's maintainable. So they get back from an hour's run or maybe a 2-hour bike ride and they've gone as hard or as fast as they can. It's not super high intensity though, and it certainly isn't super low intensity. It's in this grey area in the middle. Now, it doesn't help build any aerobic base, and it doesn't push that high end. It just sits in this grey area. Indeed, I did a little bit of stalking over the winter of some of the pro athletes, and a lot of the cyclists I was looking at, they were going out and doing bike rides that were significantly slower than most people's commuter rides. Indeed, in Phil Cavell's excellent book, The Midlife Cyclist, and I'll put a link to the book in the description below, he cites Dr. Jonathan Baker as saying, one of the fascinating trends is that the World Tour guys ride over a whole season at around 62 to 65% of their maximum. In contrast, if you look at the average amateur, they're at about 80% of their maximum over the whole season, which is counterintuitive. So as with most theories, there are flaws built into this, and this is that we're not looking particularly at threshold work here. We're looking at zones 1 and 2 for the low end, and we're looking at high zone 4, zone 5. What we don't tend to spend a lot of time on with polarised training is that zone 3, early zone 4 stuff. And I think that there is some work that needs to be done there, because if you're doing long distance endurance racing, you are actually spending quite a lot of your time at that point. But pushing the extremes is something that most athletes don't do, and that's where you'll get your biggest training adaptations. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be spending some time in that threshold area. But I'll come on to that in a bit. So what is the training that I'm doing and how am I structuring it? So the first thing I've gone back to is 16/8 fasting. Now, if you're not familiar with that, very briefly, you have a 16-hour fasting window and then an 8-hour eating window. So if I eat my tea at, say, 6 or 7 o'clock at night, I then fast throughout the night into the morning, and then I'll have a meal around 11, 12 o'clock. I actually usually wait until lunchtime, so I usually extend that to 17, 18 hours some days. But essentially, the key reasons for this in terms of intake, food intake, is that I skip a meal, I skip breakfast, and that I also stop snacking in the evening. And I know for some of you out there, that's a big problem as much as it is for me. So my training approach is based around Rod Ellingworth's structuring of the youth academy that he started with British cycling. Now that had riders such as Geraint Thomas, Bradley Wiggins, Mark Cavendish, Matt Bramier, Peter Kennock, Ian Stannard, those kinds of riders. And what he would do is he would get the youngsters to go out for a 2-hour ride-ish in the morning, and then he would get them to do their intensity sessions in the afternoon, which was sometimes would be at the track, sometimes would be out on the road. So I structure my day in the same manner. So I'll get up in the morning and I'll have my black coffee and I'll head out on the bike and I'll do a ride centering around zone 2, no more than zone 2, for around about 90 minutes up to 3 hours. That depends on my my other training, how much time I have in the day, and what time I get up in the morning. I'll be overtaken by tons of commuters in the morning with a big smile on my face, and essentially if I want to get any threshold work in, I mentioned zone 3 earlier, then I might chuck a couple of hills in there, ride those at threshold, but the main focus of those endurance rides is to ride them fasted and to focus on my fat max point, which is around about 121 BPM. Now I know from my testing at Bath University where my fat max point is, but also that doing these fasted rides is absolutely working brilliantly for me. Now, just very briefly, and if you want to know more about this, watch this video up here. RER is your respiratory exchange ratio. Now, the lowest number that you can theoretically get is 0.7. Highest number you can get is 1.2. 0.7 is pure fat burning, so very low intensity, and 1.1, 1.2 is purely carb burning. They're essentially theoretical numbers, but when I went to Bath back in February, I started at 0.7, so predominantly like almost everything that I was burning at the very start of my test was 0.7, and it actually stayed at that low point for quite a long time into my steps. So it was something that Dr. Robinson commented on, was that my fat burning capabilities through doing fasted riding were doing really well. The training is definitely functioning well in that regard, and also he mentioned that having a black coffee also seems to have some fat oxidation properties to it as well. Now, as a slight aside, you might be watching this if you've just started watching the channel and thinking, well, it's not working very well for you, is it, because you're about 100 kilos? I am 100 kilos, but I've lost 2 stone already this year, and it's still steadily coming down. Yes, I might not be a 65 kilo mountain climber at the moment, but what I've been doing so far has enabled me to steadily lose that weight and get myself down to the point where I am at now. There's more to follow. So what about the upper end or the higher intensity stuff? Well, I'll have my lunch and I'll have something that has carbs in it, and then I'll let that go down, and then in the mid to late afternoon, I'll do a 10 to 15 minute core strength session. Now, I don't talk about S&C very much, or strength and conditioning very much in this channel, but I have always had weak glutes, and it's something that I've always been aware of through an osteopath called Zara, who, when I went to speak to her about doing the Grand Tour last year, mentioned that I had to do some glute work. I have been doing that and it's stuck. I really have been focusing on a daily strength and conditioning routine. Now, what do I do in that strength and conditioning routine? Well, first of all, you are not going to see me do that because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm 100 kilos and no one needs to see this, but I'll do the classic 1990s video, the 8-minute abs video. I do that on a daily basis, and I'll also do some glute bridges, which are 15 glute raises, and then I'll hold for 20 seconds and I do 3 reps of that. So I do a little bit of activation, takes about 10-15 minutes tops, and then I'll hop onto the turbo, I'll go out on the bike and I'll do my intensity session. So my afternoon intensity session is usually very short, between 30 minutes and an hour. Now, I don't need to do 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours on the turbo, because I've done my endurance session in the morning and I'm well fueled and well ready with my activation session to do a short high intensity session. Now, like I say, it'll be 30 minutes to an hour tops. I'll put some of the names of the Zwift sessions here, just in case you're looking for them, but essentially they absolutely focus on zones 4 and 5 exclusively. The types of training sessions that you might have heard people talk about that are around this area, those things called under and overs or 40-20s, those are the kind of common names that we call them, and I tend to do them on the turbo. Now, I might not be fast and I'm certainly not very light, but one thing I do have in my favour is I know how to suffer. Now, these sessions are absolutely focused on me being able to go all in on them. Now, you're not going to find any footage on this channel of me falling off a turbo or passing out or doing anything like that, because you'll have to go to Mark Lewis's channel to see stuff like that. For me, when I get to that point where I can go all in and I completely lose myself and essentially the pixels of the television become like a supernova, that's when I know that I'm at my absolute best and I'm giving it everything I possibly can, and I can go absolutely no deeper. The idea of pressing the record button on a camera is literally the last thing that's on my mind. Not all of my intensity sessions are done on the turbo. This time of year, spring through to summer, most clubs in your area will run something called a chain gang. Now, I'm a member of 2 clubs locally and we run hours on a Wednesday and a Thursday. So if I want to, I can do those sessions one day after another. Now, if you don't know what a chain gang is, or you've heard of one and never done one, or you literally haven't got a clue what I'm talking about, you're in luck, because I'm in the middle of making a video about what chain gangs are. But to keep it short, you ride in a group and you essentially rotate off the front. How many people take part in it? the speed they ride at, how long the session is, that all has a variation on the intensity of the training session that you get. But essentially they'll always be focused up at that end around zone 4, zone 5, and you get a recovery period varying on depending on how many people are around you. So it's a really good way of kind of getting a varied intensity session, but really pushing that upper end. Our sessions around here last about an hour, and I quite often do 1 or 2 of those a week. Tonight will be my second in a row. Now, one thing I noticed the other day that's quite interesting regarding my morning session and my afternoon session is that when I'm out on my bike in the morning doing my endurance session, I tend to focus on my heart rate and keeping that really low. And then in the afternoon session when I'm working on my intensity, I tend to focus on power and keeping that high. So it's really interesting that I use heart rate and power for 2 completely different ends of what I'm doing. And that's about it. So let's very quickly summarize what I'm doing in my training. So first thing in the morning, I'll get up and I'll go and ride for 90 minutes to 3 hours in zone 2, and that'll be during a 16 to 18 hour fasting window. Then in the afternoon, after some lunch, I'll do a 10 to 15 minute core activation session, and then I will do a 30 minute to 1 hour zone 4 or zone 5 session. Now, what I do during the week is I'll balance and rebalance these things around each other. So I might not do an endurance ride, or I might not do an afternoon session. And if I've done a 3 hour endurance ride, I might only do a 30 minute intensity session in the afternoon. Or if I do a 90 minute morning, I might do a 1 hour session in the afternoon. Or I might do 3 hours and a 1 hour session. It all depends on the variation on sort of intensity and time. But essentially that's the seesaw of what I'm balancing. Low zone endurance over here and high zone intensity over here. So my week might balance out to be anything between 300 kilometers up to 550 kilometers. So anything between 15 hours and 24 hours worth of training, depending on how much time I have and where I'm at in my training. And I'll be looking at my numbers on Training Peaks and trying to get my endurance sessions in the morning to look like this, and my intensity sessions in the afternoon to look more like this. So folks, that is about it. So if you've got any interest in the stuff that we've been talking about today and you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment below, let me know what you think about your training, where you're at, what you may have learned from this video. And for the time being, I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.